So we bring in now Ryan Girdusky. I am a subscriber. Encourage you to be a subscriber as well. He is the National Populist Newsletter, founder of the 1776 Project PAC, and a master of election data. And Ryan, I want to start with this. I saw you tweet this out shortly ago. Numbers in Pennsylvania, and I think you would agree with both Buck and me that this is the biggest state. If you had to point to one state and say, "Hey, we want to know what the data is going to show there," absentee ballot requests through October 3rd, Democrats are substantially underperforming what they did in 2020. Is this a big story, a non-story? Take us into what the data is showing us an absentee ballot request in Pennsylvania.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Yes, so they're not only performing their 2020 numbers, which would make sense given that it was COVID and a lot of people, especially Democrats, were afraid to be around people, but they're underperforming their 2022 ballot requests so far. So as of right now, Democrats in the state of Pennsylvania have requested 930,000 absentee ballots. That's 61.6% of all absentee ballots. Republicans have requested 408,000 and independents 171,000. Republicans make about 27% of all absentee ballots. Republicans are getting about 7,000 to 8,000 new absentee requests per day. Democrats about 8,000 or 9,000. That is a significant difference from 2022 and from 2020, not just a mere physical number, but a percentage overall. One of the reasons why Democrats were so successful in 2022, aside from Republicans nominating a crazy person for governor, was because in 2022, Democrats walked into Election Day having a 650,000 absentee ballot requests, and they had almost 69% of all absentee ballot requests. There is a very, very, very high chance that come this election, end of this month, when absentee ballots are cut off, I believe on October 27th, Democrats will be under 60%, probably close to 59%. If Republicans can manage to get over 30%, and they're getting about 0.1% per day, 0.2% per 0.1.5% per day, that they will get over 30 and Democrats will be under 50. Now, that doesn't mean that Democrats won't show up on Election Day, but it does mean that Republicans are not going into Election Day with such a massive deficit that they can't come out. Now, that doesn't mean also.
Sorry to cut you off. What would Democrats say if they were trying to make the case for why this doesn't matter? In other words, there's always data, as you know, and sometimes data can tell multiple stories. Is there anything that Democrats could argue based on this that you think would undercut that Republicans are doing better than anticipated in Pennsylvania?
Right. So what they're going to sit there and say is that Republicans are cannibalizing their Election Day vote, that people who would have voted on Election Day are just voting early, and it doesn't actually change the total, the end date, the actual end number. What's going on in Virginia, which is very interesting, which obviously is a different state. It's a much less competitive state. It's a state that Kamala Harris is most likely going to win, is that the amount of people who have zero voting history, people who have never voted before, are inching up close to 5%. Many in Trump-leaning precincts, people who have never voted before, that they are showing and voting early. Also, people with low propensity voting history are also inching up. In Virginia, not Pennsylvania, but Virginia, 23% of all people who have voted early in Virginia have either never voted before or very, very infrequently vote. That's a large percentage. It's a little higher than normal, and it's coming a lot of times out of Trump precincts and districts that Trump won. If that is true in Pennsylvania as well, and we're seeing a little bit in the Mercer County area, a little bit in some areas that have very heavy rural turnout, which are very Trump-friendly, that we're seeing the same exact thing. Right now, Republicans are ahead of Democrats in 17 of the 67 counties. By the middle of next week, they're going to be ahead in about 22 counties. So we're going to see the numbers come in where in rural counties, which Trump would have won no matter what, the numbers going into Election Day, the numbers of votes that are completely banked for Election Day, are going to be sizably Republican, where anything on election day on top of that is just kind of gravy to offset votes coming out of Montgomery County, Allegheny County, Philadelphia County, and that's how the election is won. Is if those votes out of rural counties are so high and so heavy that they offset suburbs and the urban areas like Philadelphia and Allegheny County.
Ryan Girdusky with us now, 1776 Project PAC founder and a National Populist newsletter on Substack. Ryan, right now, Kamala's performance in the polls relative to Joe Biden, who is she doing better with? Who is she underperforming with? Because I feel like that gives us a pretty good indication of how this is really going.
Right, that's a great question. So according to there's a narrative in the media that Harris has unprecedented female support. That's not really showing up in the polling averages. She's about 15 points ahead among women voters overall. That's exactly where Clinton and Biden were in 2016 and in 2020. The difference in these polls that have a tied race, like the Quinnipiac poll, CNN, Emerson, Marist, Fox News, Pew Research, the New York Times CNN poll, they all either have the candidates up or down by a point or exactly tied, versus those races that have Kamala with a 5-point national lead is the male vote. In the races that have Kamala with a substantial 4 or 5 point lead nationwide, Trump is doing as well with men as he did in 2020 against Joe Biden. In the races where, in the polls that have him tied, Trump is doing as well with men as he did against Clinton in 2016. So much has been made about the female vote in this election, when the real story is how much are men turning up? Are they showing up? Are men actually being active in elections? Because women always vote usually more than men do. And how heavily are they siding with Trump? Because we've heard a number of stories of Trump getting support among young black men, young Hispanic men, white working class males. If they show up and if the polls are accurate, I think you're going to see elections look a lot more like 2016 than 2020. But the question is, will men actually start showing up and voting?
Ryan, if you were setting odds right now, as we sit basically 1 month out from Election Day, who has the better case to win, in your opinion, based on the data and what you're seeing on the map, Trump or Kamala? How would you assess where we're sitting?
So there's two different stories going on. The public polls give Kamala a slight edge. You're seeing averages in most predictors say Kamala has a 55% chance. Private polls, from what I've been hearing in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, have Kamala down, where they're substantially more worried. There was even a poll done by the ARP, which was done by Trump's pollster, but the internals I know for a fact have Trump ahead in Pennsylvania versus the public, which have Trump down. That's a big question. Tammy Baldwin would not refuse to go make a public appearance in Wisconsin with Kamala Harris if she was polling well. Slocum, who's running in the U.S. Senate in Michigan, made a huge headline earlier this week for saying their internals have her down. That is probably something that is worth keeping an eye on. For as much as they're saying, there could be a polling error, there is a much different story going on in a lot of internal polls than there are public polls. And Democrats are counting on early turnout right now to sit there and bank on it. If Republicans absentee vote chase, if they're early vote chase to get low propensity people who can't be counted on because they're just not as passionate about politics as, let's say, like you or I are, then that will not mean much, and we'll go into Election Day with maybe a Harris lead slightly, but enough that Trump could easily overcome it with Election Day votes.
Ryan, how's it looking in Arizona, both the presidential race and the Senate race there?
So in Arizona, the presidential race looks very good. I mean, the Republicans have consistently been polling ahead. Trump has consistently been polling ahead. Everywhere basically in the state. I'm pretty bullish on Arizona, and it's a state that had been trending away from Republicans for a while. He leads overall. Trump leads overall by an average of 1.4, but Fox News have him up 3, Marist has him up 1, New York Times has him up 5. It looks like a pretty healthy lead according to almost every pollster. The story in the U.S. Senate race is a completely different one, where Carrie Lake is in very bad shape going into this election.
How behind is she?
I've heard as much as like a double-digit loss from people, reliable people, or a very high single-digit loss, where there's almost a 10-point swing between the U.S. Senate race and the U.S. presidential race. People going in and Trump winning independents by a big number, or a sizable number rather, and her losing by double digits.
Ryan, we've talked a lot about Helene and how awful it is for so many people in all southeastern states around the Appalachian region where this hurricane came through. We played a cut of David Axelrod saying, yes, Asheville's a blue dot, but basically those voters are smarter, more sophisticated. They're going to find a way to go vote. Whereas the Trump voters, he basically is saying, are struggling more and will not. What are the chances in your mind, given there was only a 70,000 vote margin, that this storm, based on the people that it displaced and the people that are severely struggling right now, even to make it out alive, that could swing the outcome of North Carolina, maybe impact Georgia as well, given how close both those states are? Is that I know, seriously, we've talked a lot and we're going to be raising a lot of money to just try to help everybody there. But how much of a political factor do you think the storm and the displacement is?
Yeah, it depends on how. It's very hard when you look at the storm displacement to see what precincts they're out of. Obviously, you know the city of Asheville. The county that Asheville is in had about a 35,000 vote margin in favor of Joe Biden in 2020. Remember, it's not just the city of Asheville, which literally goes 90-10 Democrat, but the suburbs of Asheville are also pretty Democratic. The areas around Asheville and the counties that surround the county that Asheville's in have about a 30 to 35,000 vote lead for Trump in 2020. It could be, I mean, it depends, obviously, what areas are affected, what laws they sit there and change to somehow allow people to vote maybe in a different county if they show their registration or whatnot. There is, a decent level of time to sit there and try to find out where people are. But it's really difficult at this moment to sit there and kind of guesstimate how impactful it is and how much it will change the election. I will say in 2012, in 2012, Mitt Romney lost Staten Island, which John McCain won, and obviously Donald Trump won by a huge margin, quite a bit because of hurricanes or Superstorm Sandy. So it's not that because it displaced people from the south shore of the island, which are very Republican. It could have that kind of effect, absolutely, where the region votes differently. But I would sit there and say that probably as many Democratic precincts are, in a very, very, very bad situation as Republican precincts. It just really matters where they actually affected and what laws are changed, because they're not all affected equally. And we'll have to kind of wait and see. It's very hard to kind of estimate as of now.
Ryan,
Western North Carolina is probably the most Democratic part of Appalachia. So it's as less Republican than people. It's not as Republican as Northwest Georgia, not as Republican as Virginia or Kentucky or Tennessee. So it's not the most Republican part of North Carolina, believe it or not.
We are talking to Ryan Girdusky. Ryan, we appreciate the time. I'm sure we'll talk to you again. For people who want to follow you, encourage you to go subscribe to Ryan's Substack and also go follow him on Twitter for the data that he is putting out. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
It's fall. Guess what? Next month is Thanksgiving. I know it can sneak up on you. We're not too far away. Maybe some of you are starting to think about what you're going to be for Halloween, what the kids are going to be, what the grandkids are going to be. And maybe it's got you thinking about past falls, past Thanksgivings, and Christmas looming on the horizon just a couple of months away. How many great family memories do you have? What a great, incredible gift you could give to make sure your family has digital pictures and files that will last as long as you can imagine. That's what Legacy Box does. They take your old photos, they take your old VHS tapes. They basically can take anything, your old film reels, your old slides, and they can put them onto a digital file so that you can easily share them and preserve them for the next generation. And right now, before the chaos of the holiday gift season begins, they're offering you 50% off regular prices if you hop in line and take advantage of this offer. You can go to legacybox.com/clay for half off regular prices. That's legacybox.com/clay. 50% off right now. Legacybox.com/clay. Get hooked up today with 50% off.